Hey everyone. Before this episode starts, a quick disclaimer. We had a few audio issues during this episode, and while we were able to solve them, there are still a few audio quirks during this episode. Unfortunately, we did try our best to salvage this episode, but it's not perfect, so apologies for that. However, we are taking the precautions to make sure that this doesn't happen again, so sorry about that, but here's the episode anyway, and we hope you enjoy.
All right, welcome back to EchoVideo Podcast. This is episode 8, and today I'm joined as always by my two co-hosts, Bart and Shawn. How's it going, guys?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good.
How are you?
And not too bad. And today we have a friend of the show joining us, special guest Parker Quinn. Thank you for joining us, Parker. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me here, guys. I really appreciate it.
No problem. All right, so today I think this is probably going to be the most controversial topic that we've covered so far. And this is movies that we personally hate and or don't like, but critics and friends and or more audiences like these movies, but we don't like them. So I mean, I guess I'll start us off. I think the one movie I want to talk about is a personal absolute hatred for this movie. It is Space Jam. I absolutely hate Space Jam. In my opinion, it is the worst movie. I hate this movie with a passion, and there's a couple of reasons for it. It's not good at all. It's not funny. It's not enjoyable. It's not really throughout the movie, constant times throughout the movie, Michael Jordan will look into the camera to remind you that you're watching a movie. There are so many times that they look directly into the camera. It's like, oh, that's a little personal nod to remind you not to get too invested in the story, that it is in fact a movie you are watching. I'm a pretty big Looney Tunes fan. I grew up with the classic cartoons. I love Looney Tunes to death, and this, I would honestly, in all shapes and forms, I say this completely disrespects and destroys the legacy that Looney Tunes has made over the years. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, in all honesty, there's no redeeming factors of this movie that I could think of. I really do hate it with an absolute passion. I'd like to hear what your guys' thoughts are, good or bad. I'd like to hear them regardless.
We are starting off strong here, it seems. I've seen it once quite a while ago, and then, as you're a kid, it's fun because it's Looney Tunes. But looking back at it and seeing some scenes again recently, it is basically just a 90-minute commercial. When Wayne Knight, I guess the coach of Michael Jordan, walks into his room, he's like, "Get your Wheaties and your Gatorade, and we'll pick up a Big Mac on the way to the game." And it's just like, oh my god. It's just shameless.
Well, you just before you go on, you are right when you say that it is a commercial, because this movie was made because I think there was a brand deal with Air Jordans. This movie's made because of commercials where Air Jordan did commercials with Michael Jordan playing basketball with Bugs Bunny. And I think the Air Jordan logo was replaced with Bugs Bunny. So this movie is basically an extended version of the commercials from the 90s. Yeah, so you're not wrong in saying that this movie is, in fact, product placement.
Two redeeming factors. Actually, no, hold on. One that hasn't aged really well. Lola. Kind of hot. The weird, funny, I don't know, like Budge Bunny's love interest. I think there's been a lot of, strange, I don't know, interests that have evolved around that.
There's a lot of awakened furries from this movie.
Yes, I can definitely tell that this movie definitely kickstarted that with Lola.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Lola didn't do it for me at all. I just thought it was this weird ass rabbit when I was a kid. I did not like this movie, and just before I continue to rant on, sorry, let's just continue on. Shawn, what are your opinions on the movie?
Well, similar to how Bart had said, I saw it when I was younger, and so like my childhood thoughts on it is like, yeah, Looney Tunes is fantastic. Um, but if I'm thinking back on it now, like there's a lot of weird things about it. Like, the first thing I think of is just like random Bill Murray
Oh yeah,
is in the
Bill
movie
Murray's in the
for
movie.
some reason. I mean, I guess he makes it a bit more enjoyable, but it's still all right. He shows up, and I don't remember who the Bugs Bunny voice actor was at the time, but I remember it sounding very strange compared to a lot of the other like Bugs Bunny voices that there were at the time. I don't remember. I remember thinking it was weird because like I watched a lot of the Looney Tunes cartoons before ever watching that and going like, why does he sound weird? Even as a kid, I remember that. And I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, there's one true like the funny part about this movie is that there's one guy. Okay, Billy West did the voice for Bugs Bunny. I mean, Billy West, he's a great voice actor. I'm not gonna hate on him. Was he Woody Woodpecker, Fry? He did some great voices, but the funny part is a lot of the voices in this movie were done by one guy back when Looney Tunes was first started.
Mm-hmm.
Mel Blanc, I believe his name was. I just find that really funny. Where it's like one dude could have done the job of literally 40. So
yeah.
just and I mean, in all honesty, there was only one Bugs Bunny, and I mean, there are some good, acceptable people that have done voices for him, but I mean, Mel Blanc is quite truly the only Bugs Bunny and Looney Tune voice actor out there, if I'm totally honest. Other than that, Parker, what is your thoughts and opinions on this movie?
Well, you know what? I mean, I grew up with Space Jam. I'm a Michael Jordan fan. I'm a basketball fan, Looney Tunes fan. So I was in the same page as Shawn. As a kid, it was like, that's great. Looney Tunes and Michael Jordan. And I remember, I don't know how long it's been, like 5 years or so. I watched it, and it was just, it's one of those childhood movies that really does not hold up whatsoever. And when you brought up Bill Murray in the film, I really like Bill Murray, but I remember him playing himself, and he's just like, yeah, Michael, can you help me get an NBA career or something like that? And I'm just like, Bill Murray as no, that to me it didn't work. And I do know a few people that do really like this movie, and of course that it's their opinion. They like the movie. I'm not gonna say anything different, but to me, I'm definitely one of those people that liked it when I was a kid, rewatched it. It didn't work, in my personal opinion. And the fact that we're getting a sequel this year with LeBron James, they're definitely trying to get the what's the word I'm looking for? They're definitely trying to get people to
The nostalgia?
look back on the original Space Jam. Nostalgia, thank you. That was the word I was thinking of. But yeah.
From what I hear is that a lot of people, and I think the people that mainly like and really like this movie, only really remember it from the nostalgic point of view, where they remember watching it as a kid and they loved it as a kid and they still love it. I remember, I won't name any names, but during school, I talked to somebody about Space Jam and they were like saying it was the best movie, the best Looney Tunes movie. And I was almost ready to jump across the table at them and attack them. But I was very, very angry with them. But I think even the website, go to spacejam.com right now. It hasn't been updated since 99. It looks like it's just literally a time capsule from that era. So I think it really is just a lot of nostalgia and a lot of kind of rose colored glasses where you only look back. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Rose tainted glasses. I think it really is just that was why people are so passionate and like this movie quite a bit. So I mean, again, don't take what we're saying too seriously. If you love the movie, and that goes for all the movies we're going to talk about today. You're entitled to your own opinion, and by no means are we professionals. And should we alter your thought, your way of thinking of how you watch movies. But let's move on. Bart, what movie did you bring today for the discussion?
I'm going to start off with Elf by with Will Ferrell, directed by Dave Filoni, which is interesting. It's not so much that I don't like the movie Elf. It's just that I really hate Will Ferrell. So I feel like you guys, I don't know, probably chime in here, maybe change their mind, maybe agree with me. I don't know, but I just really dislike Will Ferrell, and I think over
sorry
by him that I'd like is.
Sorry, Bart, just before you continue on, the movie was actually directed by Jon Favreau, not Dave Filoni.
What did I say?
You said Dave Filoni.
You said Dave Filoni.
I was actually going to do the same
I
thing.
did. All right, so past that little whoopsie daisy. Yeah, I think the only like Will Ferrell movie that I could stand watching is kind of The Other Guys, because it has Mark Wahlberg, and I like that one. But other than that, I just really dislike Will Ferrell. And I remember announcing that in my grade 12 law class, and I almost got kicked out because everybody was like booing me, quite literally. And even our teacher at the time, Mr. Arndt, was booing me. So I almost walked out of class. So I feel like a strong, I don't know, fan base community based around Will Ferrell. And if you like don't like him, it's almost sacrilege. So I was curious what you guys think about Will Ferrell.
In all honesty, I do find Will Ferrell to be enjoyable. I personally with Elf though, I find Elf is like there's like a solid half an hour of a great movie. You know, a great Christmas movie, a great funny movie, a great comedy. But then there's also another hour attached to that movie where it's just very painful, very cringy, very unwatchable. And it's like you have to suffer through an hour of film to get to the really good, the really funny bits. So I do disagree with you in saying that it is a movie, that it is a bad movie, but I don't fully think that it is a fantastic movie. That's all I really have to say. I mean, your thoughts on Will Ferrell?
Yeah, I think the concept of the movie on its own is pretty cool. Like this guy being raised as an elf and then finding out he's not, and him going to like New York to figure out like where he is in life, what he is, like his identity. I think it's a cool concept. I just hate that Will Ferrell's attached to it. That's kind of where I'm at with Elf.
Yeah.
So what about you, Shawn? I imagine you've seen it. It's kind of a staple
Yeah.
life at this point, almost.
Just out of curiosity, before I say anything, why is what's your reason for not liking Will Ferrell? Like, if you have one.
So this is gonna be a little bit contradictory because in the last episode I was like raving about Jim Carrey and how much I like his facial reactions and his slapstick comedy. But then Will Ferrell does it, like his slapstick and his yelling and his annoyances. It just gets to me. Maybe it's his face.
Right.
I honestly don't know. I feel like I'm not backing this up well enough.
Yeah.
But I just really detest the man.
Fair enough.
I don't know. It's just something about him rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. Just really loud. I think a lot of his content, his comedy is just centered around screaming. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. You're welcome to prove me wrong. I think that's just kind of where I'm at with my heart passionately.
I wouldn't say you're wrong with that. He does scream surprisingly a lot, actually. Hunter, I'd also agree with what you said too, with like just the film being kind of like a good like half hour, and then the rest kind of being, I guess, just not that amazing. Because honestly, when I think of Elf, I think about like the first part where he's at like the North Pole and he's doing all this stuff, and then the rest of it, like I kind of remember it, but it's nothing sticks out to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that's accurate. In terms of Will Ferrell, I enjoy Will Ferrell enough. I think it depends on the like movie that he's in. I think with Elf, I think he did an okay job in Elf for sure. Again, definitely that first part for sure is the highlight of the movie. But at the same time, I can definitely see why you wouldn't like Will Ferrell, especially in some other things, because just he plays Will Ferrell, same thing as Jim Carrey, but I think Jim Carrey
I think he plays a lot of like the same characters. Maybe I've just only seen just, I don't know, bad in quotation marks, movies with him. I don't know, because I like the other guys, but then I hate Elf and the one he does with Kevin Hart where he's trying to escape from jail. Get Hard, I
Oh,
think.
Get Hard.
That one's not great.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody liked Get Hard. And I don't think anybody really liked that part of The Office when Steve Carell left The Office. I don't think a lot of people liked that. So, I mean,
yeah, maybe it's just my exposure to Will Ferrell. Maybe that's what tainted it. I don't know.
All right, just before we continue, Parker, what are your thoughts on Elf and Will Ferrell?
Well, you know what? I am on the opposing side for all three of you, because Elf is like a one of those Christmas movies I watch once a year with my family. So I actually do really like Elf. Having said that, your comments about Will Ferrell, I'm not the biggest Will Ferrell fan either. But I will say that he does a good job in this movie. Every other film that I've seen Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell, and then like he did like a Bewitched remake, like the TV show Bewitched or something like that.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, I saw those movies after I saw Elf, and yeah. So to me, I think Buddy the Elf is the one performance that he has done, as far because I haven't seen all of his movies, right? But of the ones that I've seen, that's the one performance where I'm like, he was good. Every other film that I've seen with him, I'm not a huge fan of. And I do agree with you, Bart, because I am a Jim Carrey fan as well. And I feel like Jim Carrey has a way of like knowing how far to go in terms of how weird and how, like you said, loud he can be. And you are right, Will Ferrell can be a bit loud. And that's one of the reasons why, a movie like Kicking and Screaming didn't work for me. So yeah, for me personally, I do enjoy Elf. I do like Will Ferrell in it. Having said that, when people talk about like the greatest Christmas movies of all time, they have it in their top 10. For me, it wouldn't be in my top 10. Maybe like 12 if I did like a top 15 list or something like that. But I do like Elf in comparison to you guys. Yeah.
Totally fair.
Right,
Totally
right,
fair.
very fair.
I mean, any last kind of notes on Will Ferrell and or Elf?
Oh, real quick, did any of you guys watch him with John C. Reilly and
isn't it Holmes and
Holmes and Watson?
Yeah,
No.
I don't. Yeah, I just know it's Holmes and Watson. Yeah, I just remember it being not funny at all. I remember it being.
Yeah, I just remember that being like critically bashed everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I was curious if you guys saw it.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but you did remind me of another Will Ferrell movie, and I actually did like him in it with Step Brothers with John C. Reilly. So I do. So that's another one that I do like. It's not just Elf. So I just want to get that out there.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the one that everyone kind of knows and has at least seen once. I feel like, I mean, it's just such a quotable movie too.
For sure.
Literally every line in that movie is repeated constantly, especially just around the friend groups that I made in college. I found that was like constantly quoted, even at like times you wouldn't know. It's like we'd just be sitting down and it'd be like, oh man, there's so much more rooms for activities. It's like, dude, we're at a funeral. Like, it's not like what? Other.
I think their chemistry is really good together. But yeah, we can move on.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Shawn, what's the movie you brought for us today?
All right, so I have a movie that I think I know the reason I don't like it, but I'm not 100% sure. I have the Blair Witch Project. And I think the reason I don't like this movie is because I think this movie just to clarify, is that Blair Witch Project 2015 or the I think 93? Am I getting that date right? The original one.
The original? Okay. Just to clarify for the audience there.
Yeah. I think this movie basically like really doesn't have a huge amount of like rewatchable value or any quality to that. And if you know like what the movie is and kind of a lot of the stuff, like, because for me, I ended up kind of knowing things about this movie because there's a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of like how found footage films and that kind of stuff has evolved from that movie. And so I don't see this movie as like something that doesn't have quality to it for things going forward, but I think it's something that if you watch it now, it doesn't have nearly the effect that it would have had when it first came out. Because really, the best way I can describe this movie, at least from my perspective, was just it's a big build up to a guy standing in front of a wall. And I mean, like, if you watch it without knowing anything and ever really seeing it like a found footage movie, then, you know, I feel like that would have been a lot more impactful and kind of creepy. But if you know what you're going into, which was the case for me, it's like, all right, sure, yeah. Where's the other half of the movie, you know? So, I don't know. It just didn't do much for me.
In all fairness, I do disagree with you. I personally like the film. I do agree with your points. I think that I think you have to kind of be in the right mindset. I mean, I saw this movie again, I saw this as a kid when I was very young, and I still kind of am, but I just believed everything that I saw on TV that said this is a true story. I was like, we're watching the footage. If something said this is a true story, I believe we were watching the actual footage of the event. I did not care. So, and the fact that this was this was definitely not the first found footage film, but this was the one that kind of brought it into the mainstream, I would say, or brought it into people's main point of view. And for me, one of the first found footage films I ever saw, this was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. I remember this film because we watched Project X with the monkey one with Ferris Bueller. We watched Project X, and then we immediately watched this movie, and I was like, man, I really wish we just watched Project X. I wish we didn't watch this movie because I'm not sleeping tonight. It's a mindset, and I mean, I don't live in the city. I live out in basically where this movie was filmed. I wouldn't be surprised if this was filmed in my backyard. Like, I live in the middle of nowhere in woods like this, near woods like this, so it's a little more effective for me as opposed to I don't know if you guys live in kind of more suburban areas where there's a lot more people around. But for me especially, I live really close to woods like these where it's easy to get lost, where it's easy to where people going missing is not an uncommon thing where I live. So it was a little bit more effective for me, but I've only seen this movie, I think, twice. So I haven't watched it recently. So this could all be nostalgia kind of rose-tainted glasses, as in with the Space Jam. But I do remember really being afraid of this movie, but also really kind of respecting it almost for doing what it did and being what it was. So I did like this movie when it came out. And that's kind of all what I'll say. I'll just move the conversation on to whoever else wanted to speak.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, actually, no, you go first. I talked last time.
Okay, cool. So for me, I mean, I'm not a fan of the Blair Witch Project. I actually watched it for the first time in October, just recently. First time, only time. And I understand why people like this film, because I know that at the time, the filmmakers basically lied and said, you know, we found this footage in the middle of the woods. We want people to see it. And these were real people. When obviously that's not the case. The case was they hired actors. These are not obviously big names like Will Smith or Tom Cruise, but like these are like actors who have done maybe, I don't know, a commercial, or maybe this is their first job. Anyway, so I understand the appeal of the film, but for me, especially since I watched it as an adult for the first time and knowing that it wasn't true, definitely gave me a kind of unrealistic approach to it in some respects. And at the same time, I do agree with Shawn in the sense that the film builds up to something like, this is going to be the scariest thing you're ever going to see. And the film just fades to black and it ends. And it's kind of like, what just happened? You know, like, so for me, I'm on the same side as Shawn in saying that the Blair Witch Project isn't technically for me. I understand the appeal in some respects, but there are a few, especially the ending, I don't understand the why people like that part so much.
Fair enough.
Yeah, sure.
Fair enough.
Going off what I guess both of you guys said, so you were saying that it has like some no-name actors, like maybe it's their first role, commercial, whatnot. I think that was effective in terms of how they marketed it.
For sure.
They have quite an infamous marketing campaign where parents were like genuinely concerned and would like call the parents of those alleged children with their like condolences and prayers and whatnot, because there were like posters of missing children all over the site where it was filmed, which I think is really cool. And in terms of what you said, Shawn, with rewatchability, I think if you were to initially watch it back in 1993, whenever it came out,
It's 1999. Sorry,
99. Okay, sorry. Like if you were to watch it now after the whole like I don't know paranormal activity craze, your Green Inferno, your whatnot, I think that most indirectly kind of diminishes the Blair Witch Project and the found footage genre itself.
yeah.
It's been so oversaturated that it kind of takes away from what the Blair Witch Project started. Sorry, Hunter.
Yeah. Sorry. Just to go on, I think that the thing with the Blair Witch is that, yeah, like you said, it is definitely a product of the time, because I think this is true for every horror movie that ever gets released, ever. It is a product of its time, and it will never be more scary than the next movie that comes out, because every single horror movie that comes out goes to top the most recent, that goes to top to be the scariest movie that comes out. So every time a new horror movie gets released, it's immediately the one that got released maybe months, a month, maybe a day, is immediately not as scary as the one that came out. And that goes with marketing, that goes with filmmakers just always trying to overtop. Like, think about Psycho. When Psycho came out, there was never any image of a knife entering anybody. You see maybe one snapshot of the knife touching skin, but you never see the knife go into somebody or anything. There was one image of a skeleton in Psycho. And now look at, I don't know, the worst horror movie to come out in modern times. You'll see someone getting ripped in half. You'll see someone getting their entrails ripped out. Like, it's just, we're just, the more we work in, the more horror we make, the more numb and atoned we get to graphic effects and kind of graphic, which is why I believe personally, when the Blair Witch Project works on a more psychological level than it does on a graphic kind of kill. Let's show how many people can we kill and how much of their entrails can we show before we're not allowed kind of deal. I think that it worked on more of a psychological level, and I think it did it really well, where it kind of, again, with the marketing, like you said, it did it that expertly, where you kind of built it into your mind that these were real people and that this was a real thing that happened. And it kind of adds to it where, let's say you watch the most recent part of Friday the 13th, part 9. Part 9 kind of entails this never happened. This is a movie. You're supposed to take it seriously. You're not supposed to take it seriously. Sorry. Blair Witch Project, yeah, like you said, has missing people posters. Kind of takes it a little more seriously when now you think that there's actual people. So it's definitely, I think that it's definitely a product of its time, and I think that can be said about quite a bit of movies, quite a bit of horror movies especially. But it is a definite atonement to this movie that I think even now, I believe this movie still creeps people out. I don't know personally, but I could believe that if it has hold the test of time and people still talk about it, people still regard it as a scary movie, that it kind of has held the test of time, which is good. But that's all I have for the horror genre. Anyways, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say it's kind of going off of Hunter, and it's going to sound like I'm kind of not so much slandering, more so going against what you guys are saying. I guess to an extent, maybe. So you guys were both saying that like the finale is kind of weak. So I'll start off by saying, like, from what Hunter was saying, every movie like past Blair Witch, whatever, tries to one up it, as any horror movie does, to be better, be gory or whatnot. And the finale, I think, especially now watching it later, we're more so accustomed to like, okay, the big final death scene. How gory can you get? But I think for the Blair Witch, the scariness of the movie is in the journey itself, and then the finale is just uncertainty, ambiguous. But I think if you were to watch it in 2021, you'd be disappointed because you're going to expect the finale to be some grotesque, I don't know, Saw-like ritual. That's kind of my opinion on it.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with what you said there. That is, yeah, no, I think that's, especially with movies. Sorry, this is the last thing I'll say on the Blair Witch, but especially with movies like The Witch and Hereditary and Midsommar, where those movies. I mean, those movies are great. Don't get me wrong, but it feels like they're more about the ending goal as opposed to the journey. Where the journey, it all, those movies build up to one big scare at the end. They're not constant scares or little scares through the movie. They're just kind of one moment at the end where it's like, this is fucked up. And I mean, I love those movies. Don't get me wrong. We'll definitely talk more about those movies in particular. And I feel like a lot of horror movies now are kind of going off of what Hereditary and The Witch and Midsommar do. It's just a constant build up to one big scare, and that's totally fine. And I think especially if you've seen those movies, because Parker, I know that I've definitely shown you a couple of those films.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe that has an effect on how you viewed the Blair Witch. I'm not saying that is 100% how it went, but I feel like it might have had a tiny effect on how you kind of saw the ending. I'm not saying that's how it was. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's the last thing I'll say on the Blair Witch. And if anyone else has any last kind of closing statements, by all means, say them now.
I mean, for me, I guess what you just said there, I actually didn't think of. I've seen a lot of horror movies before watching The Blair Witch, and as you say too, it's a product of its time. And for me, I watched the horror movies that I've seen are like the classic '80s ones that still hold up. Like A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of my favorite horror movies. And then I've seen, the more recent ones like It and A Quiet Place, and I find those more scary. But then when I go back and watch a film like The Blair Witch, I guess another thing was I was expecting more because it was a film that people talk about a lot. It's a classic in the genre. So I think I was just being a little too judgmental. So like, there might be a chance where I would rewatch it and like it more the second time, because like I said, I've only seen it once and it was recently. But so I think also with the rise of the found footage genre, like we said, with Paranormal Activity, I think everyone's just going to be comparing the films that were inspired by the old film, which was Blair Witch, of course, and then watching Blair Witch after watching those films that inspired it, and just comparing it. So I think I had that mindset when going in. So yeah, exactly. So I might go back and rewatch it, but for me personally, it won't be anytime soon. But yeah.
Yeah. I could say,
Shawn, did you have anything you wanted to?
Yeah, I could say one thing. I'll keep it brief because we've been talking a little bit long on this one, but so it's like Parker, I kind of share the same thing there because it was a little while ago when I watched it, but I had already seen like the Paranormal Activity movies at that point. So I think like with those being kind of like the bigger, more amplified, intense version of a similar kind of concept, when you go to something that's a lot more tame than Blair Witch, it definitely doesn't feel as impactful. Again, I still respect it for what it did, and it definitely pushed that kind of genre and movie, type forward. But yeah, I think, an interesting thing too is that if you were to have watched it when it was out, that realness factor for sure was definitely something that helped the movie a lot. And I think you have something similar to that now where like on YouTube, you'll get just random channels making like little like, alternate reality games, little ARG type content on YouTube, and I think that's a similar kind of thing where they like, oh, here's like a weird kind of series. Oh, it's real, and so I think that's kind of a close experience to what that would have been like at the time. Obviously, a much bigger budget thing than, even though it was a small budget movie, but a lot of people were talking about it at the time. So I think that's the closest thing to that.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, just to kind of close up. Just to kind of, we've been talking about this for quite a long time. Let's just move conversation on. I'm sure we could go a lot longer on it, but Parker, what movie did you bring today?
All right, so you guys know me pretty well. I am a huge fan of superhero movies, and whenever you go to like a top 10 list of the best superhero movies, you usually see, The Dark Knight, Logan, Civil War, Avengers, and I really like those movies. Not to say this film always shows up on someone's top 10 list. It usually does. But I am not the biggest fan of Batman Returns. This is the second film that Tim Burton directed, the second film that Michael Keaton played Batman. And I'm a huge fan of the first Tim Burton film back in 1989. It had a great balance of the tone of Tim Burton and the tone of like the Batman comic books. You got your Frank Miller and Alan Moore kind of tone with Batman there, and mix it with Tim Burton. Like, for example, in the 89 version, you have Joker with the hand buzzer. The hand buzzer scene is very Tim Burton-y. He shakes the guy's hand and then the guy turns into a corpse. But that is also very comic booky, so it works. When they did Batman Returns, because the first film was so successful, they gave Tim Burton a lot more freedom. And I feel like he had way too much freedom, because you look at Batman Returns, there isn't a Batman tone. It's just Tim Burton making a random superhero movie, and the main character just happens to be Batman. Now, I don't think it's like the worst movie ever made, because I do think the performances are great. I do like Danny DeVito. I do like Michelle Pfeiffer and, of course, Michael Keaton. But overall, the tone didn't work for me. It was just very different in comparison to the first film. And I know people really like this movie, but unfortunately, I'm not one of them. And so, I guess, Hunter, start with you. What do you think of Batman Returns?
I really like Batman Returns. I mean, I'm a really big Tim Burton fan in general. And honestly, the dude hasn't made I don't know when this last film was. Was it Dumbo? He just hasn't have it. I feel like he's been kind of like suckered into contracts by companies, and he just can't have creative freedom anymore. But I really do think Tim Burton needs to make a comeback film one of these days, because he's made some of my favorite films of all time, and Batman Returns is no exception. I actually really love the film. I think it's great. Yeah, like you said, I love the acting's fantastic. I love the costume design, especially with Catwoman and Danny DeVito as the Penguin. I think the costumes are fantastic. Like that's basically what the costumes are. I find it to be a little bit more, it's a little bit more goofy and intense and more Tim Burton-y than Batman '89. But I do feel that it is a worthy sequel. I would say definitely not better than '89, but I feel like it's worth a watch, and it is a ton of fun to watch. It's definitely better than Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, but I do feel that it is at least it's a fun watch, and it's definitely a worthy sequel to Batman '89. I feel like it didn't disrespect the character at all. I feel like it didn't disrespect Batman. It didn't disrespect any of the characters that he portrayed. I just feel like it was a really good sequel and a really solid follow up to '89. That's basically all I have to say.
Does anyone else have a?
Oh yeah, I can take it. I myself don't have too much to say about it. I've seen it, kind of like Space Jam, a long time ago. Like I have it, but I haven't seen it since in any like recent memory. It's kind of funny what you said, Hunter, about the costumes, because I thought Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, their suit, always looks to me like it's stapled together. Like I know they're like big silver stitches, I don't know. It always looks stapled together to me. That's not really a diss or anything, or like a critique. It's more just like an observation. But I do like how it just kind of took a grittier approach to it, and then afterwards, like with Batman and Robin and Batman Forever, it kind of went more comic booky. And then when Batman Begins start off after that, kind of returned to like the gritty format that this movie started, which is kind of cool. If that makes any sense. I haven't seen it in a long time to really talk about it, but those are kind of my 2 cents on it. Isn't much, but that's something.
Sorry, just before we move on to Shawn, the one thing I want to say is that scene where Selena Kyle just kind of comes home and you see her kind of daily routine, and then she gets thrown out the window of her apartment. The cats bring her back to life, and then she comes back in really like deadpanned and monotone, and then just starts stabbing everything in her apartment with like a giant kitchen knife. Is the most uncomfortable I've ever been watching any scene ever. Like, I was so uncomfortable watching that. It's like, I just want this to end, please. It's so scary. But sorry, just had to say that. Sorry. All right, Shawn, what's your opinion on it?
Like Bart, I haven't seen it in quite a while, but I think for me, when I initially watched it, I thought it was okay. I watched the first film, and then I watched the second film after that. I think there are some good qualities of this movie, and there are some things that I think aren't so great. I do think that, yeah, for sure, the change in tone is both good and bad, but I think that the first film does feel quite a bit different than the second film. So I think that, again, it's kind of a confusing middle ground, because like some things are good and some things are kind of a little weird, or just a little bit more extreme than you would want it to be. But I think that it also does have some memorable scenes in it that are kind of cool, like watching the penguin as a baby being tossed over the bridge and into the stream. Danny DeVito biting the nose of the one reporter or whoever it was. And obviously, and as Hunter, as you said, that whole scene with Selena there just going through and her house going all crazy like that. So I mean, it has a lot of memorable stuff in it, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of parts that I also don't like either remember, or if I think of, I just go like, oh yeah, that was in a Batman film. Okay, yeah, that was a thing that happened. So I think parts of it are good and parts of it are kind of a little weird. But overall, I mean, that's pretty much all I really have to say. But yeah, and very easily better than Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. It's not hard to outdo that. So yeah.
No, fair enough. Any last opinions on Batman Returns, or has everyone kind of said what they've had to say?
I mean, I guess just really quickly, I'll just say that 100%, even though I'm not a fan of Batman Returns, it is better than Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Because at least it didn't go too over the top with the campiness, and at least the Penguin didn't make any bird puns or, anything like that.
The dinosaurs.
They're sage. Yeah, so it just, for me, it was jarring, because I remember as a kid watching the first Batman movie, and then again going back to like the hand buzzer, that scared me as a kid when the Joker shook the guy's hand, but it wasn't like too uncomfortable as a kid to take me out of the film. Batman Returns, for sure, again, the Penguin biting the guy's nose off, and then like the penguins with like exploding devices on their backs, and so it definitely took a more Tim Burton approach to me, and I just, the tonal shift, and with that, I just personally was not a fan of that.
Anyways, moving on. So the film the last film I want to talk about today, this, I don't know. I don't like this movie. It's Stephen King's It, the most recent one, 2017, part 1, Well, both parts. I'll say both parts for now. I don't like both of them. I remember seeing the first part, and I really liked it when I first saw it. Then I read the book. Then I watched it again. Not good. The only thing is, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. To just kind of expand on what I'm saying, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. Like he's one of the reasons why I've kind of chosen the life paths that I've chosen. I'm a huge fan of him. I've literally grown up with reading his stuff, and the 1,000-page, literally bigger than like 3 Bibles. It has been reduced to like a 2-hour movie, like chapter 1, 2 hours. And it's a big portion of the novel, the first part.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a letdown because they have to remove quite a bit. They have to kind of restructure how the story was told, which I mean is fine. And I think they did a good job with the story structure and how they were given it. This is for the first part, I will say, is it's definitely better than the second part, the second chapter of the movies. But it's just like the movie just feels like it wants to cash in on what Stranger Things did, and that's a huge problem for me because I feel like it even if like it just on its own, I feel like would have been a pretty big selling point because it's one of Stephen King's most popular novels. It was a pretty popular miniseries, even though it wasn't really well received. People still watched it and liked it. And I feel like that source material alone is enough to kind of sell it. But then the movie almost feels like an homage to Stranger Things, where you have Finn Wolfhard, who is a very talented actor, don't get me wrong, and really did a great parts for the movie and stuff. But it just feels like, oh, this is the 80s. There's like a Backstreet Boys reference in it. When I see that scene every time, I just cringe in pain. Like they're talking about really serious stuff in the novel that is like literally pages of description so you know what this stuff is. And then they just kind of glance over it in the movie, and in opposed to just a stupid Backstreet Boys reference. It's like, come on, guys, we like, this is important stuff, but you got this. That just really bothered me. Some of the scenes. There's like a Street Fighter scene. The novel never took place in the 80s. It took place in the 50s, and then later, when they were adults, it took place in the 80s. So I don't really understand why they needed to put the kids in the 80s. I mean, I guess because it would set the adults in modern age. But even so, if you're going to go as far as to put the kids in a time period where you have to limit yourself to time restrictions, why not just go a little bit further, put the kids back in the 50s, put the adults in the 80s, and then have the 80s references? Because you'd think, okay, maybe they're going to take the second part more seriously because it's more so for adults. It's the adults. Now we live in the modern age. We don't need modern references. We're going to take it a lot seriously. It's going to be a lot more scary. They didn't seem to care in the second part. There was a lot of inappropriate humor, in my opinion, like, especially because, again, this is like one of, like, you think of Stephen King, this maybe a couple other books, this should be the first thing that comes into your head. This is like an epic. This is a not an easy book to read. It's pretty uncomfortable at times, dealing with really difficult subject matter and really difficult things to read, and it's a really great book, but the movies just didn't translate well. It just wanted to be that blockbuster of the year. It didn't want to be, like, in my opinion, this should have been an Oscar contender. This should have been a movie that had the most nominations of the year. In my opinion, like, this is one of, it just kind of personally, as a huge Stephen King fan, and I know that the directors and the writers, the directors especially, were really big fans of the books, and this isn't a disrespect to them. Maybe this is just how they read the book. But when I read this book, I looked at it as an epic, like almost like you're reading a Bible, like you're reading something that is so grand, like that sticks with you for life when you read it. And this is not the film that represents that source material, in my opinion. And I think it was just super disappointing, and in my opinion, it's a little disrespectful to what Stephen King kind of wrote originally. So sorry, I'm gonna just before I keep ranting on more about this movie, I just like to move the conversation on a little bit more. What did you guys think of it?
So I think before I talk about my opinion on it, so I think there's a clear division between those who have read the book and those who have not, because you've read it and you obviously really dislike it. Whereas I haven't read the book and I really liked it. Well, really liked is a strong word. I enjoyed it. I had a really good time of it, especially the first part. Second part is a whole different story. But yeah, so I really liked the first part. I liked what they did. I thought, once again, not having read the book, I thought it was kind of ballsy with having little kid, yellow raincoat. This name.
Georgie.
Georgie.
Thank you, Georgie. Yeah. Like having Georgie like dragged into the sewer, basically having his arm bitten off. Like I thought that was a really great way to set up the story, and I thought that was really effective, and I thought it was quite ballsy for a summer blockbuster to start off with a, I don't know, like what, 11, 10-year-old getting like his arm bitten off and dying. So I thought that was really great. So the first part I really like. The second part I have more to say about because I really hate it. So the first part they started off with like a relatively meager budget, but that the second part, because the first part made so much money, the second part they had a lot more financial freedom. And I think, I don't know exactly what their thought process was, because Pennywise is barely in the second part. And when he is, he's like kind of condensed to this CGI weird manifestation with like exaggerated limbs and like crazy CGI teeth and whatnot, instead of like the practical effects and the makeup they had in the first part, which I really think detracted from the movie, which was unfortunate. And like Hunter said, I feel like in a lot of serious moments, especially in part 2, they suffered from like the, I don't know, I guess we can call it like the Marvel syndrome.
Inappropriate.
Any serious
Inappropriate
humor, yeah. Especially with Bill Hader. I like Bill Hader, don't get me wrong, but him as a grown-up like Finn Wolfhard really just like was forced to make all these like weirdly inappropriate jokes during all these serious moments. Like his love interest dies, and like 2 minutes later, he's like cracking jokes about how ridiculous Pennywise looks in the finale of season 2, or not season 2, chapter 2. I don't know. To me, it was just really odd, and especially the structure of part 2, where they keep jumping between like the adults and then the kids and the adults and then the kids and whatnot. It really, I don't know. It makes it very convoluted, and of all the weird like CGI and like those jump scares. I don't know. I think everything great about the first part is missing from the second part.
Sorry, just one last note about the second part. The ending with where Pennywise turns into the big spider.
Yeah,
absolutely awful in the modern. It's not even that. In like when he turns into a spider, I don't expect it to look like this stupid centaur with his regular clown head. What's wrong with just turning into a regular spider? Like a spiders on own, I think arachnophobia is like one of the most common. Even in it was way better handled in the miniseries when he turned into a spider. And it's like when you see it in the modern one, it literally looks like something out of some stupid, I don't know, some PlayStation 2 video game from the 90s, like Clown Spider or some. Yeah. It's like, it looked bad. I didn't like it. It wasn't scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry. That's just what I.
So for me, as someone who has not read the book, and I haven't seen the miniseries, so I've seen both of these movies with no context other than, the trailers and then, knowing what the plot is. I walked out of the first film and I just thought it was good. I didn't love it. I know when that was one of the biggest movies when it came out. Like everybody loved it and I just thought it was decent. And going back to what you said about the 80s nostalgia thing, I didn't mind it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a big fan of Stranger Things. I'm saying that because it would be easier for the filmmakers to do one period piece as opposed to two different period pieces. Instead of making, okay, we're going to do one movie in the 50s and the other in the 80s. Let's do one in the 80s and then one for today. So I didn't mind that change. Chapter 2 has, the performances are fantastic. The cast is amazing. James McAvoy, Bill Hader, Jessica Chastain. I'm not going to name everyone. But I was very, very disappointed with Chapter 2. I thought, I know, I remember they each had to get their own like object in order to kill Pennywise. And it was like one by one, we're going to show them get their object. But along the way, they have to remember something from their past and then fight Pennywise in the past and then fight him again in the present day. Then they get the object and then we're going to move on to the next person and they're going to do the exact same thing. So for about, I don't know what it was, an hour and a half to 2 hours, because I've only seen the movie once. For an hour and a half to 2 hours, it was super repetitive. It was, okay, I'm here. Oh, look, there's the object. Oh, wait, I got to think back for a second when I was a kid. Oh, yeah, Pennywise attacked me here. And then it was like, okay, never mind. I'm back. All right, let's get the object. Oh, wait, no, Pennywise is right behind me. Oh, no. We survive? Okay, I got the object. Let's go. That was it for about 2 hours or so of the film, because I know it was like a close to 3 hour film or something like that.
Yeah, it was like...
Yeah, it was pretty long. And it was really disappointing to me because, again, what Hunter said, how the book, it, is basically this epic. It is something huge that everybody talks about. So when you jump in for, again, as someone who has not read the book or the miniseries, I had high expectations for the second film. Even for someone who just liked the first film, I was expecting this to be like, maybe this film will have me like part 1 more. And to be honest, walking out of part 2, it made me like part 1 less. Just because it didn't fit. I know that the director, he said that he wants to do like an extended cut of it, as if both films were one film. And so I really hope he doesn't do that, to be honest. If he does, I'm not going to watch it. I'm sorry. But for me, I think the first film is decent. It's not like a horror movie I go back to every Halloween or anything like that. And again, after watching Chapter 2, I've started to like it less and less. And Chapter 2, though the cast did a great job, and it's one of the best casts I've ever seen in a film, they weren't strong enough to basically make me like the movie more and more. Obviously, it depends on the direction they take it and the repetitiveness, as I mentioned before. And so I was very, very disappointed with Chapter 2 when I was hoping for it to be this like epic horror film. And yeah, I don't mean to repeat myself, but so I'll just end it right there.
Perfect. All right, Shawn, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I can't really say too much because I'm in probably a weird boat where I haven't read the book and I haven't even watched these movies, but I've watched the miniseries, and that's the only thing I've seen it wise.
Tim Curry is all you need.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I need. I mean, I have seen clips of the movies. I've seen, the trailer for both Chapter 2 and the first one as well. And I mean, there's been nothing that's made me go like, oh, I want to watch those from having just watched the miniseries. Like, I mean, I realize there's things in that are clearly missing from the book as well. And there's a lot to the book, but I feel like I've gotten enough out of it that I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good with that. So they didn't really entice me to watch those films at all. And after hearing people's complaints about them as they were, coming out and stuff, and people were watching them, then I'm like, okay, so even more of a reason to not really care at all to go and watch them. So I mean, and based on how you guys have been talking about it so far, I again, not really a huge reason to be like, yeah, no, I have to watch it. So I mean, maybe read the book at some point, but that's about it. So yeah.
Fair enough. Just the last thing I'm gonna say, and this is just kind of for movies based off of books in general, not just this movie, but the thing that really kind of gets under my skin and pisses me off is that, and goes for the Stand TV series. I believe we talked about that in episode 1. Wasn't a big fan of that. Is that when a movie based off of a really great book gets announced, people get excited, people want to see it, and when it sucks, now you have to live with that movie for like 20 years. Because there's no way that's getting remade next year. Like that's why when Dune is announced, I love the book Dune, and I love Denis Villeneuve, and I'm pretty sure he's going to do some fantastic things. But there's a lot, in my opinion, from reading the book, there's a lot happening in that book where it could go wrong. And if it goes wrong, when was the last Dune movie made? It was made in like the 80s.
David Lynch, right? David Lynch directed that one, right?
Yeah, David Lynch.
I think so.
If it goes wrong...
Yeah, David Lynch didn't even like it.
It has been from the 80s all the way to what I assume this year, hopefully, it might even be next year, for this movie to be adapted. If Denis Villeneuve fucks it up, and I really am hoping he doesn't, because I love Denis Villeneuve and I love Dune, we have to wait possibly another 40 years for it to get adapted, and even then it is potentially not going to be great. So that's why I hate when books get adapted, because of that. Like Pet Sematary, it just got recently adapted, and I mean, the first adaptation of Pet Sematary isn't fantastic. It's got some okay moments. It's not a great film. It's like a solid 6 out of 10. It got recently adapted, and you think, okay, you have the ground basis of the first film to work off of. Let's improve upon what they've messed up on in the original. I don't think that was what they were thinking of when they adapted that film.
They were thinking money.
They were thinking, this hasn't been adapted in a while. Let's do it again. And that's just the thing. It's just what I worry about whenever movies based off of books gets made. So I have really high hopes for Dune and Denis Villeneuve. I'll say that. I'm not hating on the film before it comes out. I'm a little inside. There's a little part of me that's saying there's a little part of me that's skeptical, but I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyways, that's just why I'm the most disappointed about it. And that's, sorry, Bart, you have something to say?
Oh yeah, one tiny last thing on it. So I know I knocked the humor in chapter 2, but the humor was also, to an extent, a little bit less present in chapter 1. But I feel like it's much more natural that way, because like I myself as a kid has made some like wildly inappropriate jokes at inopportune moments to kind of like almost like a coping mechanism. But then it's weird seeing like 40, 30-year-olds making like those same jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Like Bill Hader as Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah. But you can't deny the Jabba the Hutt joke was great.
Oh, God.
But I do agree with you. Everything else, the Bill Hader jokes, yeah.
All right, we can move on here. Bart, what's the next film you have to say or talk about? Sorry.
All right. So I have Black Panther. It's not so much a bad movie as it is, in my opinion, incredibly overrated and, for myself, disappointing. I don't know if you guys had the same experience, but like Black Panther was everywhere in 2017?
It was February or March of 2018 was when it was released.
Yeah, no, that
was right before Infinity War.
Early 2018. And I like Chadwick Boseman, and you got Michael B. Jordan. Fun cast, great cast, a lot of fun. Like coming out of Civil War, I think Black Panther in Civil War was like one of the, in my opinion, best characters. And it was kind of meh. But it got like, hold on, I got a list here of how many Academy Award nominations it had. You had your Best Picture, Best Sound Mixing, Editing, Original Score, Production, and Costume Design. which I feel like in the first 30 minutes, maybe those are warranted because in the first 30 minutes or so, Black Panther has like an all practical suit and it's really cool. But then there were like complaints by Chadwick Boseman that he couldn't breathe, which, granted, it's pretty important to breathe. So they transitioned in like the next hour and 40 minutes to just CGI, which I think really took away from it. So I'm just kind of going on a tangent here, but I'm just going to go all over the place. In the finale, for example, so you got Michael B. Jordan and T'Challa fighting, for be the next heir of Wakanda. Yes. And they're just fighting like bare chest, whatnot, spears. And it's really cool. And it's quite well choreographed. And there's stakes. One's going to probably die. The other's going to become the leader of Wakanda. But then in the finale, they both have their suits. And they're just kind of mashing into each other. You guys know the Canadian TV show Reboot?
Yes.
Oh.
Looked like they were just like bouncing into each other, and there's no stakes because they have like impenetrable suits. So I'm just kind of going off a loose tangent here. If you guys chime in, I'll be able to better express my feelings towards it.
For me, I actually do like Black Panther. Now, do I think that it is this Best Picture nominated film? No, I do not. For starters, I'm a huge Ryan Coogler fan. Creed is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'm also a big Rocky fan too, so like I'm a little biased there. But I personally like Creed more than any of the Rocky movies. Anyway, for me, yeah, when Civil War came out, Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman was the best part, if you ask me. He and Tom Holland were like the two that stole the show, and that's mostly because it was their first film with those characters. So I had pretty high expectations, not only because of what I saw in Civil War, but the fact that Ryan Coogler was directing. And I do agree that I disagree with you because I definitely like it more than you. But I agree with you that it's not this huge, Best Picture nominated film ever. Like, if any superhero movie deserved a Best Picture nomination, it should have been like Logan, if you ask me, personally. The CGI in the last fight scene.
Woof.
It's definitely the worst CGI I've seen in the MCU.
Was $200 million, which kind of just baffled me.
Was it really?
Yeah, $200 million.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. Wow, I didn't realize that.
What was the budget of Cats? What was the budget of Cats? because they did some real work on that film.
They sinned in that movie. That is a crime against Jesus. Right?
All right, sorry, Parker. Go back to what you were saying.
No, you're all good. It's just for a comic book fan myself too. They made a few decisions that were disappointing to me. Having said that, I do understand why they did it. For example, Andy Serkis's character Claw is like one of Black Panther's biggest like villains in the comics, and they kill him off halfway through the movie. And I understand where they're going with the story, but at the same time, I'm just kind of like, maybe you could have done like Claw in the first film, and maybe Michael B. Jordan's in the first film, but he's not the main villain. And then you do like Black Panther 2, and Michael B. Jordan is the main villain. But of course, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. We don't know what they're going to do with Black Panther 2, so they had to make some changes. But so for me, I do believe that Black Panther is a good movie. I don't think it's this perfect superhero movie. I do like The Dark Knight and Logan, and even Civil War more so. But I will not deny that it is, a fun, action-packed superhero movie, even though it has really bad CGI at the end.
Yeah, I like Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger quite a bit. I think out
He's
of
awesome.
all the Marvel villains, he's got some genuine, like, motivation that you could probably get behind.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the character of T'Challa is just relatively absent, quite literally, because after he gets tossed off by Killmonger, he's gone out of the movie for literally 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And everything just kind of goes on without him. But then in another part where I feel like a lot of Marvel movies kind of thrive off the chemistry between characters. But to me, Chadwick Boseman, like, not so much him, like Black Panther in general, doesn't really have that like back and forth. Like, Thor and Hulk do in Ragnarok, or like Iron Man and Spider-Man, or Gamora and Nebula. Like he has his sister and his love interest and his mom. But I don't know. To me, that's really not. I don't know. He just feels kind of absent from his own movie.
That's a good point. I actually didn't think of that. Yeah.
That's what I have to say. I don't know who wants to go over here, but
I mean, I've seen Black Panther once. I didn't think it was an awful film. I think it was a little disappointing for the time. I mean, I think the Marvel movie before that was Thor Ragnarok, and I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of Thor Ragnarok, but I know it was really, really well received, and I know a lot of people really liked it. So I mean, just going from that to Black Panther, it seemed kind of like a downgrade. But then it's not even. I mean, Black Panther isn't the worst MCU movie by no means.
I think it's just disappointing.
Yeah. If anything, I think Thor: The Dark World is the worst MCU film. Yeah.
I have to say that I think Thor: The Dark World is okay, and except it's not unwatchable. Captain Marvel is unwatchable in my opinion.
That's definitely in the lower half.
Well, that came after Infinity War.
Captain Marvel was right after Ant-Man and the Wasp, which was also right after Infinity War.
Oh, okay, true.
Yeah, so they did two movies between Infinity War and Endgame. Sorry,
both. Yeah. I mean, no, good. I honestly, I thought it was the movie after that. Both those movies, I would say, aren't really worthy of following up Infinity War, but Captain Marvel especially. I mean, when I think of Captain Marvel, for some reason, I always think she has this like kick-ass mohawk and has like a really distinct design out of all the MCU heroes in the Avengers. I always pictured her as like with the most distinct design, like even in the comics where she kind of stood out amongst all of them. And the movie, she had this. A, she didn't have the mohawk, and that kind of made me mad. B, she just looked like every single. She didn't look unique at all. The costume was like this boring ass blue for 90% of the movie, and all that. I think I can't remember fully, but all I remember is that it adds one shade of red. And it's like, oh, like that's it. And then somebody told me that, they are going to give her the mohawk. So I thought, okay, maybe at the end they'll give her the mohawk, like she'll shave her head or whatever. Nope. It's just
she got
one
in
moment.
Endgame.
It was just one moment where the energy beams kind of looked like the mohawk. I mean, that doesn't work. I didn't like that, honestly. And it was just a forgettable movie. Not very funny and out of all the MCU movies, it was not funny. It was not a fun movie. I'm sorry. I just had to break off from that. Shawn, what are your opinions on Black Panther and or any of the MCU movies?
I guess we could combine them at this point.
Yeah, might as well just combine them.
Overall, Marvel movies I think are pretty good. They definitely just consistent, like good, like hard hitters, just for like know how successful they are. They're really good that way.
For sure.
Also, by the way, I don't know where I saw this, but I saw this somewhere. Supposedly, the CGI for that last scene in Black Panther had to be like redone because Marvel didn't approve it, and it was done in like 2 weeks before premiere.
Oh,
so
really?
Yeah,
wow, that's stressful.
The fact that it exists at all is surprising, but doesn't mean it's good. Either way. Unfortunately, though, I'm going to be put on a stake for this because I haven't seen the movie. Yeah, I mean, I get the advantage of people that like this movie saying like, "Oh, you hate this movie." It's like, no, I just haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Fair enough.
What is a mob? What do they have like when they're rioting? Pitchfork. Thank you.
Oh, I was going to say picket fences. I was going to say picket boards or
those
something.
two.
Works fine. I mean, going back to Captain Marvel, I think it was a very poor time to introduce a new character because like half the world was just snapped away. Ant-Man and the Wasp was a sequel. I think that's fine because it was necessary to, initiate
Yeah,
Endgame
yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
But to just introduce Captain Marvel, I think it was really kind of decrease the stakes of Infinity War because like, okay, half the world is gone, but we can still just introduce new characters who are basically gods, no problem. I don't know. To me, that's kind of what it felt like.
No, I get that too. Yeah, I get that too. Yeah, I do think if had Captain Marvel been released like before Infinity War, maybe like around, maybe even like Phase 2, like maybe before Age of Ultron, around the time the first Guardians was out, I would say that I would care more for the film. I don't mean that in any disrespect, because Captain Marvel isn't the worst film I've ever seen. It's not a bad film, but it's like mediocre at best for me. Um, but you're right. Like after Infinity War, you're just like the stakes are high. You have a fun movie with Ant-Man and the Wasp, but then when you have Endgame next. That's that's the weight of the MCU right there. That's the stakes. And then you put Captain Marvel in there and it's like okay. Like so I do think it was kind of a poor choice to have Captain Marvel be the film between and before Avengers Endgame and Infinity War.
You know what the most memorable part of going to see Captain Marvel was? It wasn't even the movie itself. It was right after the theater, right after we left the theater. I went to the bathroom in the theater bathroom, and it's like, at the Cineplex they have that line of like 20 urinals. All of them are open. I go to the one at the far corner. This old man goes to the one directly beside me out of like 19 urinals, and he legitimately out of my peripheral looked right at my dick, and I was like, bro, I was like, what?
I remember you walking out of the bathroom and
like,
just being like, this just happened to me.
I was like, what? I was like, I don't even know how to take that as a compliment or assault. Like, what? It was very uncomfortable. So that's the most memorable thing that happened after I saw Captain Marvel. Anyways, sorry, Shawn, what's your last movie you brought today?
Hot take.
All right. Yeah, apparently. So, yeah, just before we started, I know, Parker, you might have a contradictory opinion to this, but I
was joking,
have
don't worry.
Annihilation, which the only reason I really have this, because I wouldn't go as far to say I hate this movie. I'm just not a huge fan. And the main reason I have this, though, is just because I feel like I personally enjoy watching a lot of movies that are like that kind of like sci-fi sort of mystery sort of thing. And I watch a lot of movies like that. And when it came to watching this one, I feel like my experience of leaving this film after seeing it was mostly just like, meh. I feel like there wasn't really anything that like grabbed me. Like when I think of the movie, I can really only remember the ending just because of how like kind of odd it was. But I mean, other than that, like it's not a super complex story from what I remember. I have trouble kind of remembering things that happened in the movie, and I think for me too, that is part of the reason as to why I'm not a huge fan of it, because if I don't leave the movie going like, oh yeah, this happened and that happened and stuff like that, or even like, just being able to describe it in a way that would make it sound interesting to somebody who would maybe want to watch it, I feel like I'm not really getting much out of it. I think, the effects that it had in it for some of the sections was good. I think the cinematography for the film was great. It looked phenomenal. But I just think that it didn't really have enough unique story elements for me that made me enjoy much of it. Not that I hated it. I just don't think anything stood out to me that made me go, oh yeah, that's something that I need to talk to somebody about. Like, I'm just like, yeah, it was a movie. Like, so yeah, but I don't know what your guys' opinions on the movie are, if you've seen it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie. I'm a big fan of Alex Garland. Basically, I like the thing with this movie was this was kind of, in my opinion, might kind of be contradictory of what I said about it, but it reminded me of John Carpenter's The Thing quite a bit throughout the film, where it had some really great creature effects, and I think that's like I miss like monsters and aliens in movies with great effects. So it was kind of really cool to see some. I mean, there wasn't a ton. There was that bear halfway through, and that was awesome to see. And I think that there was really good creature effects in it. There was really interesting story. This movie, in all honesty, could be the prequel to Pokemon, in my opinion. I think that's quite honestly what it was. The prequel to. It makes sense. So let's hope that the next movie he does is Pokemon the movie following Annihilation. I mean, I really did enjoy this. I had a really good time watching this movie. Like you said, a really great cinematography, but it's hard to say how I felt leaving this movie. I mean, it definitely wasn't like a movie that I was talking about for months on end, but it wasn't a movie I was not talking about. It wasn't a movie that I got out of and was like, oh, that was good, and then just kind of stopped thinking about it. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't a perfect 10, but it wasn't terrible. It was just kind of a movie that you just kind of is there. You watch it. I didn't really feel like there was anything bad about it. I didn't feel there was anything too like fantastic about it, but I don't know. It's definitely like, it's a weird movie for me. I did enjoy it though. That's all I have to say about
it. So I'll go to the opposite side of the spectrum. I adored this movie quite a bit. Like you said, I love Alex Garland. Great lad, great director, very, very creative, very, I don't know, I guess, unique style directing, that's what you want to call it. Like it's noticeable, like you can tell it's an Alex Garland film. I don't know, I just like that he brought this to Annihilation, because if we're talking about books to movies, Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, this is a pretty faithful adaptation, I'd say, at least theme-wise. So I thought that was really cool. And like you said, the creature effects are indeed great. The bear, especially, like I watched this in theaters. It came out on my birthday 3 years ago. Who knows? But if you watch like the actual like creature models, the bear who eats character Anya, I think.
I believe so.
And like they kind of morph into each other, and she uses like the bear uses Anya's voice to like lure people outside of the house. I hope you've all seen it. This is just spoiler territory. But anyway, if you look at like the creature models that they used, you can see like Anya's mouth inside the mouth of the bear, kind of like a xenomorph, and that's the thing that's screaming, and it's absolutely terrifying. I don't know. I just really like this movie. I thought it was a really interesting, creative take, and it came out around the same time as Black Panther, and I picked Annihilation to watch on my birthday, and I was really thankful I did. It kind of came out of nowhere. It was a good time. Didn't know anything about it. Happy I went with it. So I really like it.
I'm more leaning towards Shawn. Actually, when you told me that one of the films that you picked was Annihilation, I reacted like that. I was just joking around. I think Annihilation's just a decent film. I don't think it's great or anything. I kind of walked out of the theater being like, okay, that was a movie, like what Shawn said. Having said that, I've only seen it once, so I might have a different approach to it when I watch it a second time, because I actually have been curious about watching it a second time. But I know we've brought it up multiple times here, but the bear scene really was really fantastic. I really did enjoy that sequence. But to me, that was just the only sequence in the entire film that was like, whoa, you know? Yeah. That was the only one for me. Everything else I was like, okay, that's cool. Sure. I mean, like, so I would like to rewatch it because I do know that people really like it. Maybe it's just, I was actually stressing over an assignment for school when we went to see the movie. So I guess I was thinking more about the assignment than I was thinking about the movie. I did well on the assignment, by the way. Anyway, so, uh, yeah, I do want to rewatch it, because, like I said, I was a little distracted. But that sequence was very good, and yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
I think the finale, like where Natalie Portman goes against, I guess in essence, like her doppelganger, like that silver metallic looking DNA replica, whatever. That
Yep.
was such a trip, like watching it in theaters for the first time. The last like 15 minutes of this entire movie is just like, my God, it kind of felt like I was on acid. Never been on acid before myself, but I feel like that's what it would have felt like.
Yeah, likely.
An experience. And I thought that was really cool how I don't know, how Alex Garland was able to bring that to the screen out of the book. Because even in the book, it was like quite wild. You're welcome for that. Not much of a contribution, but there you go.
Yeah. No, I thought that scene was very interesting. I do like that it was kind of. I mean, I don't remember. I think that whole scene was pretty much silent dialogue-wise. I don't think there was any dialogue or anything really said during that. A lot of that's just kind of open to interpretation for like the decisions made there, and just the interaction that was happening. So I mean, yeah, I guess Parker, I kind of agree with you in terms of things that like I remember being memorable about the movie. Pretty much just that bear scene, and I guess the ending scene too. But like, pretty much when I think about this movie, that's the only things that come to mind. Because the rest of it, I just kind of remember it being kind of just like wandering throughout and kind of figuring out where to go. Maybe I'm misremembering, but that's really all I can think of immediately. Anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a good. Yeah, I think it's another good example of a good kind of Lovecraft style of horror. It's not a lot of those kind of cosmic. I guess it's called cosmic horror. Maybe it's Lovecraftian. I'm not sure. Lovecraftian horror is kind of far and in between, but I think when some films get it right, they really do get it right, and I do think that Annihilation is one of the films that does get the Lovecraftian style pretty. I do feel it gets it right, in my opinion. It's definitely worth a watch if you're an H.P. Lovecraft fan. But no, I do kind of agree with the opinions you did share, Shawn, as well. Not my favorite. I definitely preferred Ex Machina over Annihilation. So not my favorite Alex Garland film, but it's definitely not a film to kind of think it was just kind of not a film to glance over, in my opinion. Anyways, we'll move on to the last film that we're going to talk about. Parker, what's the last film you've got today?
Yeah, so my last film is pretty recent, so I'm not entirely sure if you guys have actually seen this film or not. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan. I love the Dark Knight trilogy. I love Inception. His most recent film, Tenet, was it didn't work for me. It's just not for me. I think the main reason, especially from someone who just graduated from film school, I couldn't hear the dialogue. The music in a scene was louder than the dialogue. The sound mixing was terrible. And that actually pissed me off. And I actually wondered, like, I was just curious if, like, Christopher Nolan was going to release, like, another cut of the film with, like, a better sound mixing. Because maybe he just ran out of time and didn't have, couldn't fix it. I actually read an interview and he said, no, I did that on purpose. For art and all that. And I just said, okay. When you think of art, obviously that's their idea of art. That's their filmmaking. that's, whatever it is. They didn't ruin it if it's their art. However, it does question whether his idea of this is perfect works. And I don't mean to say like Christopher Nolan is an idiot or anything like that, because I think this guy's a genius, because Inception and, like I said, The Dark Knight are like two of my favorite movies of all time. But for me, it was just when I can't hear dialogue, when I'm not invested, I just say, okay, I'm done. Like, I don't care. I'm sorry. So I don't understand why he chose to do something like that. And I don't understand why he even bothered putting dialogue in. Like, it could have just been a silent film or something like that with really cool CGI, and I probably would have found it entertaining. And even if he subtitled the film, I would have been fine with that. Like kind of like watching a foreign film like Seven Samurai. If he subtitled the entire film, I would have been fine with that. But the fact that he didn't do that, and again, the music was louder than the dialogue in the scene, and the fact that he did that on purpose really frustrates me. So I'm just gonna. But having said that, the action sequences and the performances, as far as I can tell, were really, really good. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Tenet for now.
No, it's a fair point. I did have that. Especially I didn't get to see it in theaters. I was watching it at home, so I was just kind of every kind of 30 seconds was adjusting the volume. It did get kind of repetitive and annoying at the same time, and it would be fine if it was in a movie where there wasn't a lot of story. Like, it seemed like every dialogue, every word of dialogue needed to be listened to. It seemed like one of those kind of films where it's like, oh, in order to understand everything that is written, everything that is spoken is essential to understanding the plot and how this world works. And I couldn't hear it. So that was very frustrating, especially like there are scenes where there's huge action scenes and there's explosions and there's talking, and it's like, okay, I hope they're not saying anything important. And then there's a scene where there are literally two people in a room talking, can't hear it. You got music in the background. It's just like, man, I really wish that. I do agree with what you said wholeheartedly. That being said, I do find, I looked up the story and I looked up videos that explain the story. I do find the second viewing, after knowing all the details and everything to be said, it's awesome. It's really fun. It's really exciting. You get your blood pumping. You got a great score. You got great direction, great cinematography. Everything's on par. But the thing is, like, why I shouldn't have to go to the internet and watch a video on the plot of a movie. I shouldn't have to do that to understand a movie. That, I know that there are some movies where the ending are so complex, but it's like, in basic, it wasn't even to understand the ending. It was just to understand why they were doing all this, why the movie was getting started. That I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to watch a full YouTube video explaining the plot of the movie. I should understand some of the plot, and then maybe have to look up a video explaining the ending a bit. But I do agree with you wholeheartedly that the sound mixing was a bit of a dropping of the ball. Mm-hmm. And sorry, go ahead.
No, and I'm just saying that, like, a movie like that basically proves the point that audio is very important to a film. Yep. And I did the exact same thing that you did. I went on YouTube to, see, like, what the film was. Because I agree with you 100%. I shouldn't have to Google or look up on YouTube the plot of the film. Now, if a movie, I understood the entire movie, and then the ending I didn't understand, maybe I'll look it up. But if it was the full movie, it was just like, why bother, Yeah. So that's just my opinion, at least.
What are some other opinions on the movie Tenet? I know we kind of talked about it a bit briefly in our first episode, but let's stick mainly with the kind of sound design, sound edit, sound mixing of the film, if we can.
Oh, I'm going to take it immediately the other way. Well, honestly, not so much. I just want to praise it first of all. The practical effects are really, really great. Like, or I mean, the practical sequences almost, I guess. Like them crashing the airplane into the hangar, the chase on the highway, the reverse fight scene, really great. But I agree with you guys on what they said about like the sound mixing, the sound editing. So much, it's really difficult to understand what is happening, and it kind of just feels like you're watching like a monster truck bash, like just things crashing into each other, and it looks cool, but you're not really sure why. That makes any sense? Like in the first 20 minutes or so, when the lady scientist is explaining the reversal mechanics, like this gun has fired a bullet, but even if you haven't fired it, like the reversal aspects of it, and she says directly to John David Washington, like, don't try to understand it. So it almost feels like the narrative itself, and even John David Washington's character is just called the protagonist. I think it's almost just like a display, a grandiose display of awesomeness and stuff that just, I don't know, transcends time and space, and you're just witnessing it, and you're not so much trying to understand it as it just like witnessing it. If that makes any sense?
Mhm.
I don't know. It just, that's kind of what it felt like he was going for, but I don't think it was like delivered super well because there was so much dialogue, and even like you said, if it's just two people talking in a room, like there's conflict building, but you don't know why or what they're doing or what is happening. You're just kind of there. So yeah, I thought that my theater was just messing up because like the initial fight scene, like the where the SWAT team basically enters this opera house, I thought I was going deaf because my God, those gunshots broke my eardrums. I was like, holy Jesus. So in one sense, it's kind of weird, the contradiction, because there's like it's so heavy, like narrative and dialogue based, but at the same time, it's like just ignore it and watch it. And the clash there, in my opinion, isn't great. I like what you said about the ending. Like I can enjoy Inception on a first viewing and understand what's happening, and maybe I want some explanation on the ending, but I can still enjoy the film and understand what's happening.
Mhm.
Whereas Tenet, I'm just kind of watching, but having no idea what's happening.
Mhm. Sorry, before we jump to Sean, I do actually want to say this that I didn't mention before. I do think it's very good visually. It's just the audio that really bothered me, and the audio is, of course, very important in the film. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Um, it's funny. So when I watched it, I watched it at the theater where I am, and I did have that same thought with the audio being very hard to hear, and specifically when you hear um Nolan saying that no, that was on purpose. It's a little frustrating, but I also when I watched it in theater, it I think where I was sitting was like right next to one of the like side speakers, so I thought that I was just
Oh,
not hearing it well at all, and I was hearing it even worse than it was already terrible. Um, so it was hard to hear for me. Um, I felt like I got most of the film still mostly visually, except obviously I'm not understanding a lot of the reasons for conflict, but I can kind of just loosely was able to assume like, okay, that's somebody that he's having a conflict with. I guess they suck for some reason. Um, but I mean, um, I enjoyed the film overall. Uh, However, I think that with some of those things, like, well, Bart, when you were saying how like the in part of the movie how it's like, oh, don't try to really understand the mechanics of how it works, or how the character is called the protagonist or whatever. I feel like with all the things that like you know Nolan wants the audio to be like that, and those are parts of the movie, and also the fact that like this movie came out pretty early COVID, but he was still pushing for it to come out in theaters and not on demand or anything like that. I feel, and maybe this is inaccurate, and I hope it'll be inaccurate, but I feel like there might be a possible future of Christopher Nolan maybe getting a little too artsy with his movies and a little too like particular about things and just like, no, it works because I say it works. Um, and I mean, like, I'm not against people trying new things, but I feel like there's an eventual like, I'm not so sure about that. So I just hope that that doesn't happen.
I
But
wonder,
I still enjoyed the movie.
just real quick, I wonder if that's why he was pushing for a theatrical release, so he wouldn't understand it. Because if you watch it at home, you can just turn on subtitles.
That's true. That's a good point.
Because then you would just understand what's happening right away, and it would kind of diminish the impact of his sound mixing. I don't know. I wonder if there's anything there. Maybe not. Maybe that's just my conspiracy theory for today. Who knows?
It's possible.
Possible, yeah, for sure. All right. Any last notes on Tenet? I am good. I am all noted out for Tenet. What about you guys?
Likewise.
I'm good.
All right, and with that concludes episode 8 of EchoVideo Podcast. I'd like to thank everybody for joining me, and I'd like to thank our listeners for listening. Hopefully you don't take what we say too serious. Hopefully you don't get too mad at us. Other than that, thanks for listening.